Hello and good evening to everyone. Thank you very much for joining me again. I'm Dr. Philip Macmillan, and I am your trusted source for breaking down complex health related topics related to COVID 19 and autoimmunity. And so I want you to join me as we navigate the latest research and give you insights to protect and enhance your health. It's a great line, isn't it? So remember to subscribe. So, I am here talking to you about natural immunity in COVID 19. Is it actually better? And why am I sharing this? Because of a very interesting tweet that I saw recently. And I'll share with you this tweet here. And in this tweet, I'll make it full screen here. You can see that this is from Prognostic Chats. And he said he's a palliative care consultant, and he said, I have seen a disproportionate number of young patients with advanced cancer over the last 2 years. They used to stand out, now it's every week. And then he highlights this quote, SARS-CoV-2 can be considered a potential risk factor for increasing the probability of developing cancer. Wow, isn't that interesting? So, in effect, what it's suggesting is that SARS-CoV-2 in and of itself seems to be a risk factor with regards to getting or increasing the risk of cancer. Very, very important point. So, essentially, what I'll be trying to do here is give you some basic information about the research, basic information about the virus, and why that principle of natural mucosal immunity is such a critical part of that puzzle. It's important to highlight that just recently I did a presentation where we were comparing a very important Cleveland Clinic study. And in this, they were comparing two groups of workers, those not up to date with COVID vaccination. So this is a wholly vaccinated group, and those up to date with vaccination. And what they were noticing is that there's an increased risk of infection in those who are up to date. But you will notice in the whole cohort, whether or not they're up to date, there is an increased risk of infection. This is fundamentally what the problem is. And part of what I'm trying to see if I can delineate is explaining to you why this occurs and why it's relevant. So let's just quickly go back to what this palliative care consultant was talking about. And he was making a reference to this study here. And this study was actually done in June 2022. And it was looking at the SARS-CoV-2 M protein facilitating malignant transformation of breast cancer cells. And effectively, what they did, they put the M protein with these breast cancer cells in a culture, so to speak, and they looked and they found that the SARS-CoV-2 infection might promote the ability of aggressive breast cancer cells to induce the malignant phenotypes of other non-aggressive breast cancer cells. And so essentially, they were finding poorer outcomes in these patients, and TNBC means triple negative breast cancer patients, when they had a recent infection. So this is all very, very important. And it ties back to what I was saying. At the end of the day, the challenge seems to be to prevent infection with SARS-CoV-2. Whoever or wherever this was cooked up, this is one heck of a virus. Do not underestimate it. So here is what the virus looks like. And this is just a reminder of the science. So here is the virus from the outside. And the blue bits are the spike proteins. And you can see the cut section of the virus here. On the inside here, this is the RNA that the virus will use to replicate itself. And this is the nucleocapsid protein. But you will see on the surface here, there are some yellow, orange and red dots. The orange is the envelope protein, and the red is the membrane protein. So you have lots of these membrane proteins scattered throughout. And so I'll not be going into the details of the membrane protein, but it seems to be an essential part of allowing the virus to put itself together when it is infected a cell and creating new viral particles. And so what they were saying was this M protein, these little red dots, seem to be able to be driving the potential of cancer. That's actually very, very worrying. So here are the basics with regards to understanding how the immune system works. And this is where it's important to be educated. I found that this image from Wikipedia, brilliant image. So I'll take you through what it is essentially saying. They are saying that this here is the difference between blue here, mucosal immunity, and systemic immunity in red. When you look carefully, when the virus comes into your upper airway, it still has to penetrate the mucous barrier. There are lots of IgA antibodies that are there, and they will be working to block not just SARS-CoV-2, but any viral infection, influenza, other coronaviruses, RSV. They are working to try and protect it from infecting the cells. This is the epithelium. Now, let's just say the virus gets through this barrier, then there are still defenders, there's defensive, there are little proteins inside the cells, perforins, that help to fight against the virus. Plus there is interferon. So even if the virus penetrates that, it still has to pass through a physical barrier called the basal membrane. If it passes through that, then it has to get past other immune cells, the B cells, the natural killer cells, the T lymphocytes. And if it passes those 4 layers, it can then get into the lymph node and the bloodstream and finally the organs of the body. And that's how mucosal immunity works. So there are 4 levels of failure that the virus has to go through in order to get into the bloodstream. And the principle is that in natural immunity, that mucosal barrier, that 4 levels, is better trained to fight against any virus once it has been exposed to it. Here is the problem that we are facing at the moment. We are depending primarily on vaccine-mediated or hybrid immunity. Here is our problem. I've used the same image and I've brought in here a needle, which is to represent a vaccine. But you will notice that this is the part, the systemic immunity, is what's stimulated, the lymph nodes and the bloodstream, so they produce lots of antibodies, and then there are lots of antibodies floating around in the bloodstream to fight against the virus. But who wants that when you can actually build the wall of natural immunity here to protect the virus from even getting to here? And that's the difference. So in someone who has been infected and has had symptoms, it suggests that the virus got into the bloodstream, but their natural mucosal immunity is now well trained. And so in theory, it's then harder for the virus to be able to penetrate these 4 layers that have now been well trained against the virus. It seems that when somebody has been vaccinated, this level of protection is not the same. You don't get the same level of training of mucosal immunity. And that may be the reason why virus is still circulating. And remember the principle. It seems that if the virus is penetrating this barrier and getting into the system, that's where all of the problems lie. Our challenge is, how do we keep that mucosal defense working? And this is my image of what I call that natural mucosal immunity. This is the bubble here that protects you. If you can keep that well protected, reducing stress, healthy lifestyle, good levels of supplements, vitamin D, that mucosal bubble can protect you against the virus. Problem is that's not forever because it wanes. And so one of the very important points that we have to think about is that if a virus continues to circulate, everybody is at risk. That's a really important point. We need to figure out how to stop the virus circulating. Here is an image that I created that I hope you can understand about the difference with natural versus hybrid immunity, as hybrid vaccinated immunity. Here I've got a picture of a young man. These are his arms in the air. They should be looking like this, but they don't. Instead, he has tremendously powerful looking legs. He's obviously only been working out on his legs. You would not put him in a ring to fight against somebody who is very powerful because he hasn't trained his upper body. I hope that concept gets across to you. And this is effectively what we're having with hybrid immunity. Very strong systemic response with lots of antibodies, that's like the legs, but no effective training for the arms. So the arms are not equivalently balanced to the legs. That's where the challenge lies. So the principle that I'm trying to bring across to you is very simple. Remember that at the end of the day, your mucosal immunity is like a protective layer. If that mucosal immunity remains in place, it's very difficult for the virus to break through. Most of the problems that seem to occur in the longer term related to the spike protein, related now to the M protein, which is on the surface, and this would be the M proteins here, are related to the virus penetrating that mucosal immune system. Our challenge is, how do we get the population to reach a level of protection, mucosal protection, that the virus is able to stop circulating so it doesn't put the whole world at risk? I hope you found this valuable, and I think that this is something that we all need to understand better. Click on the link below if you want to see more videos, and remember to tap on the subscribe button. Have a great evening.